There's something very masculine about sitting down and in a respectful but confident tone. Just having the conversation about boundaries in the current milieu is actually quite a dominant thing, to be able to confidently ask these questions without seeming to be awkward about it. Question today comes from Kimberly. For her first date, she's invited to his home and she goes. Over there, this man gets very quote-unquote dominant and kinky. There's ass slapping, pushing against the wall, and it takes some effort on her part to get him to stop the physicality and have a conversation. He reveals that he is into BDSM and kink and begins asking her probing questions about whether she's into orgies or anal. When she responds, "No, I'm not," and further informs him that she has no experience at all with BDSM, he tells her that she will be. Kimberly goes on to ask if this kind of behavior is normal from a dominant towards a submissive. After all, she opines, this is definitely an exhibition of dominance, but the entire episode feels very uncomfortable and off-putting to her.
Let's get the easy part out of the way. This is not in any way healthy BDSM or dominance. This is just aggression and immaturity on his part and taking advantage of her naivete, of going to his house on the first date and basically just jumping in without discussion, without consent, without discussing safe words or limits or boundaries or likes, dislikes, literally just, so it's absurd on the face of it. So we can get that easy part out of the way. But let's dive into why is she even slightly confused? If it's so clear cut, then why is she even slightly confused? And I think there are reasons for that. She says this is definitely an exhibition of dominance, and she's wrong, but she's not completely wrong in that there are aspects of what he's doing that would be seen in a healthy context after a discussion of limits and likes and boundaries and safe words. So, for instance, many submissive women struggle a little bit with the initial setup of a kink interaction because the subconscious desire that they're trying to get met is the desire to be led. And so then discussing limits and boundaries and this and that at first feels like they're doing the opposite of being led. It's necessary to be able to do it safely and healthily, but there is a bit of a conflict there between the submissive desire and the needs of the initial setup. I would say that the experienced dom taking advantage of the naive sub is the magician archetype, which I talk about in the book. The person who has more information, more knowledge, taking advantage of the person with less knowledge. That's a kink. That's a mindfuck kink. That's the essence of what we call a mindfuck, is leveraging excess information in one way or another. This is just an unhealthy version where this is not kink, this is just abuse. And the line there is the line of consent and negotiation and discussion and a way out. That's why the safe word is so important, is if there's no way out, then it's just reality. It's not play. And it's important because kink, as I've said many times, exists in the twilight of the half real, is the phrase I use in the book. It's not completely just play. It's not just silly play. It means something. It is important. It is reflecting real aspects of our psyche, but it's also not really real. It's not, you can't sell your slave on the open market. So that twilight of the half real is important, and the thing that defines it in many ways is the way out, the way to end it and the way to have discussions outside of it. The other thing I will say is that he tells her she will be. I don't have any experience of BDSM. Now, in a healthy relationship, long-term relationship where there's tons of trust, there's discussions, there's understandings of limits, understandings of who she is and what she's into and what she likes, that could be a very hot thing to say. That could be a very sexy, confident thing to say. In this scenario where there's no relationship, there's no trust, they're just meeting, it's not. It's just off-putting and kind of rapey and comes off as him telling her what she's into, which it is.
And just to expand on why it would be hot for him to say in a very trusting situation that you will be, is that the implication is that he knows her so well, better than she knows herself, that she will eventually come around to liking this thing. And then that's an expression of confidence as opposed to an expression of an abusive personality.
That's exactly right. You can take that even a step deeper, which is since they both know that he doesn't know her that well, all of that confidence comes from some sort of stereotyped projection upon her. So it's a very false confidence in that regard, because he is just projecting whatever he thinks about women or whatever he thinks about submissives onto her, which is completely independent of her actual self. It's a false confidence, and that falsity is revealed by the reality of the context.
This reminds me of back in the day, there was this whole movement of pickup artists, the mystery and the Neil Strauss, the whole idea of the game. And what they would do is they go to bars and they would have all of these sort of artificial forced behaviors like peacocking or negging, and they had terms for all of these things. And one of the things that emerged from that movement was while these people were really good at picking women up, they were completely incapable of staying in a relationship with any of the women because they hadn't thought past the initial picking her up and bedding her, because they hadn't really connected any of those behaviors to a more fundamental sense of themselves. That, oh, I am actually a confident alpha male. I am actually exhibiting traits of an alpha male. It was just like a papered over superficial wallpaper-like set of attributes that they would try to emulate without having it connect to anything deeper about themselves. And I wonder if this guy too got on some Reddit forums or read some or got some bad advice from someone. Hey, women really like it when you're dominant. Women really like it when you're assertive. And he just didn't really know what to do with that. And he just forced these behaviors. Because when he says something like, well, you will be, it almost sounds like a line that he read somewhere, or he was told by somebody that if you say this to a woman, she'll get wet right away or whatever. And then he just does not know what he's actually doing.
I mean, obviously, we're reading these things with no context of verbals, nonverbals, et cetera, right? Said in a teasing way with a wink, you will be, even to a stranger, can come off cocky funny, but you have to play it for laughs. Playing it seriously requires a serious understanding of who this person is. Hey all, this is Athos. If you're enjoying this content and you'd like to see more, please be sure to spank that subscribe button. It's been very naughty. And if you'd like to have your question answered on the show, please feel free to ask us by email at deeperkink@gmail.com or click the link in the description below to complete the form. Now, back to the show. Yeah, I like what you said about that comparison with the pickup movement kind of art, or the pickup artist movement, in terms of the superficial version of things without the underlying reality. And that's part of our social problem as well, is that as societies have gotten bigger in scale, we're not operating in tribes anymore. We're not getting to know each other as much over time. We meet a ton of strangers and we're trying to pick partners out of a mass of strangers. The ability of people to use signals without having underlying reality in place has gone up. If I can rent a Lamborghini for a night, I could signal that I'm very wealthy. Now, if somebody's into that, or if I need to make a business deal, or if I'm trying to get a girl who wants a rich guy, or whatever I'm after from that, using that signal, I can get. If people had to get to know me over time, that would fall apart very quickly, right? Oh, you showed up with a Lamborghini one day, but then you drive your Corolla the rest of the time, right?
Wrong with a Toyota.
I had a Corolla when I first graduated, and I read the review article of that year's Corolla.
Did it say pussy magnet?
It did not. It did not, in fact. Surprising. Yeah, no, it accurately described it as the experience of playing the most boring video game ever invented. And I think that was exactly right. Yeah.
I had a slight pushback to something you said earlier, which is that when a dominant meets a potential submissive and they're having conversations about consent, and he's asking her, hey, are you okay with this, that, or the other, that there may be some element of, well, that's not real dominance or extreme, full-on, full-spectrum dominance, because consent is being asked. So to some extent, you are perhaps losing a little bit of the dominance in some manner of speaking. But, in today's milieu, where there's really a lot of confusion about what it means to be a masculine man, where most men are afraid to ask a woman out, so to speak, or afraid to assert themselves or their needs in front of a woman, there's something very masculine about sitting down with a woman and in a respectful, but confident tone, asking her if she likes taking it up the ass, or if she's okay with having her orgasms controlled, or how does she feel about deep throating, or whatever it is. That just asking the question, especially if you're doing it in a confident, unabashed way, there's a strong flavor of masculinity to just asking the question, especially in the context of our modern dating and relationship situation where things are really breaking down. This whole idea of being a masculine man is thought of as almost being toxic, and there's this feminization of men that's happening. So just having the conversation about boundaries, I think, is in the current milieu is actually quite a dominant thing, to be able to confidently ask these questions without seeming to be awkward about it.
I'll agree and disagree. I think so. For instance, one thing, for instance, in my perspective, I think it would come off a bit non-dominant to ask it that way. Is, hey, do you like taking it up the ass? Why? Why is that come off as non-dominant? Because I'm using arousal language in a conversation that should be discussion language. Is, hey, have you ever done anal? Are you comfortable with that? How do you feel about that? And when I use more sexy terms, like, do you like taking it up the ass? I'm mixing the two, which often comes from a discomfort place, is I'm not comfortable having a simple language conversation about, hey, let's figure out, what are you into? What do you like? However, I do agree with you that it feels confident, which is a necessary subset of dominance. It's a necessary prerequisite for dominance, to be able to say, this is what I like, this is what I'm into, what do you like, what are you into? Let's have this conversation in a way that is straightforward, direct. I think directness is masculine. And that's something that comes off very non-dominant about the example, is he didn't have the guts to talk straightforwardly. He had to try and push her into it. There's a sneakiness about that. There's a sidewaysness to the pressuring there. Is that he can't say, hey, are you into this? And hear no, and be like, okay, cool. I'm not threatened by the fact that you're not into the same things I am. Like, maybe we shouldn't sleep together. Maybe we know that if we do sleep together, this is going to be a short-term or casual thing because we're not into the same things. And being able to put that out there and say, hey, maybe we shouldn't move forward. Let's just have a cup of tea instead of hooking up. You know?
Yeah, precisely. The ability to hear no and be okay with that was also quite dominant. He's not even asking because he doesn't want to hear her say no.
I agree with that. I don't know that I would, and maybe we're nitpicking terms, but sometimes they matter. I don't know that I would call it dominant so much as the prerequisites of dominance, which is things like confidence, comfort in yourself, self-knowledge, self-competency. Those kinds of things are prerequisites for actual dominance. And yeah, when you start showing things that undermine those prerequisites, then dominance also falls. But it's not maybe dominance itself. Those are just the prereqs.